Revenge with Karen.
Be useful, darling, she said, her voice dripping with that bright-eyed, backhanded poison only the truly entitled can muster. The boardroom went still, but nobody said a word. Not the CEO, not the interns, not even the janitor who'd just finished buffing the goddamn marble tile. Sierra, 26, surgically confident, wearing her daddy's job title like a prom sash, had just ordered me to fetch her dry cleaning. In front of everyone, the board discussed quarterly strategy. While she stood at the front of the room, arms folded like she was Marie Curie, and we were all just waiting for her to split the atom. I sat there for maybe 2 seconds longer than I should have, just long enough for the heat to crawl up my neck, just long enough to register the smirk creeping across Sierra's face, like she just swatted a fly that had been annoying her all morning. I was a fly now, a relic, MO from 2009 that had somehow come to life and refused to retire. My fingers curled around the dry cleaning receipt she flicked onto the table like a parking ticket. A white paper slap. Her manicure was perfect, probably cost more than the community center I got funded last month. I rose, slowly, elegantly, like nothing was wrong, adjusted the sleeve of my navy blazer, and walked out of that room without a word. I've spent 18 years in that building. I know the way the lights flicker in Conference C after a rainstorm. I know which of the elevators still dings on every floor, and which ones the fire marshal never got around to inspecting. And I damn well know how power moves. It doesn't scream. It doesn't pout. It doesn't slam doors or throw tantrums about oat milk. Power waits. And when the moment's right, it strikes. Now, before we go any further, let me just pause for 1 second. If you're still here, still listening, first off, bless you. Second, this little tale's got more receipts than Sierra's Gucci folder. And I promise you, the twist is worth the ride. So if you like stories where office royalty gets dethroned by the quiet ones who remember everyone's middle name and lobbyist connections, do us a favor. Tap that subscribe and like button. Seriously, 95% of you just listen without clicking. It keeps our crew caffeinated. Unlike Sierra. Anyway, the moment that door closed behind me, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even sigh. I just walked to the lobby, handed the receptionist the receipt, and asked her to send a courier. That's what Sierra really wanted, right? A good little assistant. She had no idea she'd just tossed gasoline on a bonfire I'd been building for years. On my way back upstairs, I passed a junior analyst, Ryan, I think, who looked at me with this weird, guilty half-smile. He wasn't sure if he should say sorry or salute. I nodded at him, said nothing. By the time I reached my office, I already had 2 unread emails, one from HR, flagged urgent, the other from Sierra's assistant, titled Budget Reassessment Notification. I didn't open them. Instead, I closed my office door, softly like always, sat down at my desk, and pulled out my old black notebook. The one with the state capital seal embossed on the back, one they gave me when I helped kill Senate Bill 1127 in less than 48 hours. I opened it to a blank page, and I wrote her name, Sierra Bell Hendricks. Then I wrote the date and underlined it twice. The door to my office had barely clicked shut before the wolves started sniffing. First came a knock, half-hearted, polite, the kind you use before dropping a landmine. Ryan again, the junior analyst. His face was redder than a boiled shrimp. Miss Rutherford, he mumbled, just wanted to heads up, I overheard something. I motioned for him to come in. He stepped over the threshold like it might bite. They froze your department's budget, he said, eyes bouncing everywhere but mine. Sierra said it was pending review. Something about reallocating philanthropic redundancies? I smiled, not kindly. Redundancies. Boardroom euphemism for let's axe the old guard before they embarrass us with actual results. Thank you, Ryan, I said. He nodded like he'd just confessed to murder and left without another word. I turned to my desktop and opened the internal calendar. Sure enough, 2 high-level grant meetings I'd personally organized with our university and municipal partners had new hosts. My name, scrubbed. Its place, Strategic Innovation Team Lead, Sierra Hendricks. The blood behind my eyes pulsed once, a slow, volcanic beat. I clicked over to our grant proposal archive. Locked, access revoked. Then came the ping. HR, subject line, advisory-only role reevaluation action required. The email was bureaucratic word salad dressed in HR-friendly beige. But the message was clear. Sierra wanted me gone. Not fired outright, no, she wasn't that bold. She wanted me neutralized, stripped of influence, made into one of those ghost employees that float around, attending diversity luncheons until their keycard stops working. Cute, but Sierra didn't know the bones of this company. She didn't know that the reason we'd gotten federal infrastructure grants for the past 5 years wasn't because of some glossy PowerPoint, was because I'd flown to Des Moines in a blizzard and held a state senator's wife's hand during her chemo consult. It was because I had the private number of the chair of the Regional Union Council and had been the only person he trusted enough to babysit his cat when he went into surgery. None of that lives in dashboards or linked in posts. I didn't reply to HR. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't schedule some showy meeting to assert my worth. Instead, opened Outlook, and I began to move. I wrote 4 emails, each short, precise, surgical. First, to the director of the State Redevelopment Initiative, confirming my continued alignment and contribution to the Tech Corridor Fund. Second, to the head of the governor's Civic Outreach Task Force, a gentle reminder that the press embargo on our joint pilot program lifts next week and that our internal alignment meeting was still scheduled, correct. Third, the dean of the local state university, the one with the underfunded STEM program I'd quietly backed for years. I offered a friendly update on our matching grant status. Oh, and a personal favor, if any strange funding interruptions arose, to contact me directly. Fourth, and most importantly, to an old friend at the state Capitol press office. Subject, quick timing check. That's all I wrote. I hit send. Then I got up, walked over to the framed certificate on my bookshelf, the one Sierra probably thinks is a participation trophy, and pulled it off the wall. Behind it, my old Rolodex, the black one. I placed it on my desk, and I turned the first card. It read, Carlson Marie Governor's Chief of Staff. The next read, Denton Lou Labor Council. The third, Press Capital Pool Access Badge #382L, Rutherford. I didn't need revenge. I needed timing. Right now, Sierra had no idea she'd just walked into a game of chess she couldn't even see. 12 years ago, I was standing in a wine bar 2 blocks from the Capitol, swirling a glass of overpriced Merlot while a state senator's aide hyperventilated over a misworded clause in a budget draft. The wording threatened to divert $3 million away from a community health initiative. I'd spent the better part of a year lining up like dominoes. Me the damn pen, I said. I rewrote the clause right there on the back of a cocktail napkin. By morning, it passed unanimously. The senator called it an internal correction. His aide never told a soul. They don't put that on the Employee of the Month plaque. My job title has always been a lie. Director of Philanthropic Strategy sounds like I spent my days picking out ribbon colors for children's cancer fundraisers. The truth was a political weapons contractor in kitten heels. I could get a charter school fast-tracked or a liquor license buried. I helped structure land use grants so that the union votes came in green and the regulators came in blind. And I never once put my name on anything. Every deal, every handshake, every strategic oopsie in a competitor's audit trail tied neatly back to the company. That was the agreement. I'd keep them clean, and they'd keep me protected, till the new VP walked in with his spawn from Stanford and decided the housekeeper was sitting in the living room. Sierra thought I was just the wallpaper. Beige, replaceable. She never once asked herself how the company's charity division somehow had deeper reach into the state legislature than our legal department. She assumed I was lucky, or slow, or, God help us, humble. She didn't know I had a direct line to the governor's scheduler. Had used it to quietly kill a property tax revision that would have cost our board chair $2.4 million over 5 years. Didn't know I once got a hospital CEO fired for sexual harassment after overhearing a single conversation in the coach room of a gala. One call. No headlines. Just a resignation and a strategic shuffling of the board. Didn't know that when she showed up with her innovation team and her TED talk buzzwords, already had a sealed envelope waiting in legal, contingency documents that would pull every penny of state-level matching funds out from under her projects if my name vanished from the leadership roster. And up until now, I never planned to use any of it. See, I liked being invisible. There's a luxury in being underestimated, in watching the suits puff out their chests while you quietly decide which way the wind will blow. It's more fun that way. Safer, too. This wasn't about fun anymore. Sierra hadn't just threatened my budget. She'd walked into the engine room of a political machine she didn't even recognize and started flipping switches like a toddler in a cockpit. So now, I was done playing steward. I was going to remind the board, and Sierra especially, that I wasn't their decoration. I was their damn foundation. I leaned back in my chair, eyes skimming over the Rolodex. Each name wasn't just a contact. It was a story, a favor cashed, a deal done over bad chicken or bourbon at midnight. Every one of them owed me something, and every one of them still thought I worked quietly behind the scenes. Good. Let them think that a little longer. Let them think the Queen's still asleep. The first call was to Will Morneau, senior legislative advisor, and the kind of man who always picked up on the second ring, even if he was mid-heartburn in a committee hearing. "Will," I said, voice calm like we were discussing dinner plans. "You still running point on the tech redevelopment fund?" "Yeah, why? You got something on the zoning bill again?" "I've got something better," I said. "That pilot initiative your office is bragging about. The $20 million community tech grant. The governor's baby? Sure. We're finalizing the announcement next week. It was my team's funding that built the back end." He went quiet. Not because he was surprised. I told him months ago we'd foot the risk capital, but because he knew what I meant when I resurfaced old favors like that. "You want a seat at the press table?" "No," I said. "I want the announcement moved. Hold it here, in our offices. Thursday, noon Thursday, during lunch, exactly during lunch. And I want the governor himself to make the statement." He exhaled. "You pulling rank on this, I'm cashing in. I'll owe you a bottle of scotch." A pause, then, done, one down. Next, I rang Marie Carlson, governor's chief of staff. We'd played nice for nearly a decade. I once helped her brother's nonprofit survive a budget massacre by getting it labeled infrastructure adjacent. No one even knew what that meant. That was the point. "Marie, it's Laura. You free Thursday? For a camera-friendly walkthrough. Governor gets his photo op with community leaders and STEM interns. You get union praise, tech optics, and a diversity win." "Oh, the building's ADA compliant and close to the press circuit. Where's this happening?" "Our office. We'll prep a floor." A long silence, then a sharp laugh. "You're finally playing your own game, huh? Maybe. Tell me who to coordinate with. Send the media notice to the board's press liaison. Let them think it's a courtesy." Marie snorted. "You want them unprepared?" "No, I want them honest." Two down. The final call was to Nadine at the Capitol Press Pool, head of external coordination and the queen of well-timed B-roll. "Laura," she said, voice bright, "to what do I owe this terrifying pleasure? Need a feed team Thursday. Studio grade, full credentials. For what? Governor's announcement, our office. 12th floor, you moving into politics finally?" "God, no," she laughed. "All right. Who gets the tip?" "No one," I said. "Not until he's walking in." "Ooh, got it. Classic Rutherford ambush. This gonna be messy. It's gonna be clarifying." She whistled low. "Remind me to bring popcorn." I ended the call and sat for a moment, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my monitor. Not smiling, not angry, just still. 3 calls. That's all it took. The initiative was already built, 3 years in the making, funded through quiet interdepartmental redirects, tax-advantaged vehicles, a ghost-written grant proposal that had somehow won most impactful community proposal last year. Sierra didn't even know the fund existed. She'd been too busy redesigning the company logo in Innovation Blue. The best part, the board had signed off on every step. They just didn't remember it because I never asked them to. I handed them polished outcomes and let them smile for the annual report. Now, for once, the cameras were going to turn my way. Not for vanity, not for revenge, for leverage. I wasn't going to take back my seat by whining about respect. I was going to let a sitting governor walk through our doors, look the board dead in the eyes, and thank me by name for delivering the biggest state-funded win of the year. Right in front of Sierra. Right in front of the man who called me low impact in last quarter's notes. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a single, gold-plated pen. When they gave me the day, I signed the Memorandum of Understanding that made the Tech Corridor Fund real. I set it gently on my desk. Let the cameras roll. Wednesday morning, Sierra summoned me to her office with the same energy a teenager uses to call a dog that doesn't come fast enough. She was wearing a coral pantsuit that looked like it had been tailored by someone angry at fabric. "Laura," she chirped, "we're doing something fresh tomorrow. Leadership strategy activation." I almost laughed. Instead, I blinked. It's going to replace the usual board meeting agenda. Total pivot. We'll be leading with innovation alignment mapping and cross-functional empathy sprints. You'll be excused from attending. Excused, you'll be managing catering. Sushi, vegan-friendly. And please make sure the water's in glass bottles, no plastic. Optics matter. She actually winked. I nodded. Understood. She grinned like she'd taught a goldfish to fetch. "Thanks, Laura. Oh, and just stay off the 12th floor tomorrow. Don't want any unnecessary distractions. Let the new generation lead, of course. When I left her office, I didn't head straight back to mine. I took the long hallway that passed facilities, poked my head into the janitor's closet where Hector was restocking soap. You still working the noon shift tomorrow? I asked casually. Yeah, moved me to 12th for the exec meeting. Gotta polish the floors. Mind doing me a tiny favor? He looked up. The press thing? I smiled. Hector wasn't just a janitor. He was my failsafe. We'd met during the remodel 4 years ago when he found me crying in the stairwell after losing a $10M grant to a competitor's bribe. I got him a union contract with triple his previous rate. He never forgot. I'll leave the marker under the center chair, he said, ready digging through a drawer. He pulled out a discreet silver sticker with a tiny X in the center. The press team's indicator. I gave his arm a gentle squeeze. Just make sure it's centered and visible on camera. He nodded once. They'll never see it. Back in my office, I printed out the catering order and walked it upstairs. Sierra's assistant looked up from her phone, startled. She asked for me to deliver it personally. I lied. The assistant, ready drowning in Canva graphics for tomorrow's empathy sprints, waved me through. Sierra barely looked up when I entered. Perfect. Just drop it there. Oh, and wear something dark tomorrow. The branding palette is color coordinated. Dark, I thought. How fitting. That evening, I stayed late. Let the building empty out. Around 7:15, the press tech arrived, badged, credentialed, moving like a ghost. We'd run this drill before, tripod preset, lens tested, feed connected to the press pool uplink. No fanfare, no disturbance, all legal, all invisible. By 8 p.m., I was back in my office, lights off, watching the footage test from the dry run. The sticker gleamed just enough to catch the frame's center. Perfect. Thursday came with fanfare. Sierra arrived in full command, high on her own importance, flanked by 2 marketing interns, and some poor middle manager who'd been guilt-tripped into clapping at every leadership insight she posted on Slack. I was waiting by the front desk at 11:45 with 5 neatly arranged sushi platters, 2 trays of gluten-free spring rolls, and 6 glass carafes of pH-balanced water. Sierra's assistant waved me toward the break room like I was some Grubhub ghost. No need to hang around, she said, not even making eye contact. I left the food, took the service elevator up, slipped into my office just as the board filed into the 12th floor conference room. They were met with Sierra's new activation wall, which looked suspiciously like an Instagram photo booth. I watched from the corner camera feed, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. At precisely 11:59, the janitor entered the frame, buffed the floor once, left the sticker, walked out. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever notices the quiet ones. Sierra tapped her iPad to start the slideshow. Her first slide was titled, "What if leadership was a feeling?" I smiled and waited for the sound of dress shoes, state security, and a dozen camera shutters approaching from the elevator hall. At 11:07 a.m., a junior exec named Matt tapped on my door, eyes darting left and right like he'd just witnessed a mafia deal go down at the copier. I'd always liked Matt, mid-30s, sharp, never too eager, but smart enough to know when something smelled off. He stepped in and closed the door halfway, then lowered his voice like he was passing state secrets. "Laura, I just saw 2 guys in suits sweeping the 12th floor with comms in their sleeves." I raised an eyebrow. "Security," he whispered. "State level, not our normal badge crew." And the receptionist said they flashed capital IDs. I leaned back, pretending to think, offered him a light smile. Probably just a walkthrough for the renovations. You know how jittery they get about compliance. Matt hesitated. "You sure? Because they're checking exits and the break room's blocked off." "And I'm sorry, but why are you not in the board meeting?" I folded my hands on the desk. "Because I'm exactly where I need to be." His brows knit. "Laura, look, you don't have to take this. Everyone's talking. You carried this department for years, basically funded half the building we're sitting in." I gave him a look that made him pause. "Matt, what's the most dangerous thing in a flood?" He blinked. Drowning? No, it's the furniture. The things that float beneath the surface until they take your legs out." He stared at me, and for a moment I think he understood. I gestured toward the door. "Thanks for checking in." He left, still baffled, but no longer worried about me. Downstairs, Sierra's voice could be heard from the hallway, bright, nasal, rising with irritation. "Why is everyone so twitchy? Can we please focus on the presentation and not the janitor polishing invisible dirt?" I watched the live feed as she tried to gather the room's attention. Her slides had devolved into meaningless graphs titled things like Synergy Horizons and Trust Capital. She had a post-it stuck to her heel, and no one was brave enough to point it out. Outside the conference room, 2 more Capitol security officers took their positions. One at the main hallway, one near the freight elevator. They moved like they'd done this exact drill 100 times before, which they had. A few staffers from marketing were milling around the copy center, whispering in confused huddles. "Is the governor coming here?" one asked. "I heard the tech announcement was happening in Midtown." "No, it's supposed to be at the governor's mansion," another replied. "I saw the release memo. Think Sierra arranged this." They all laughed at the same time. Sierra, meanwhile, was turning redder with every passing minute. At 11:23, she hissed at her assistant, "Why are there cameras being set up in my boardroom? Did someone double-book the space?" The assistant panicked. "I thought they were with you." Sierra looked around, voice rising. "Okay, no. Someone's ruining my board debut. This is literally the opposite of leadership energy." The room had turned tense, like something was about to detonate, but no one knew if it would be a fire drill or a media ambush. Only I knew it was both. The board members were shifting in their seats. A few checked their phones. One leaned to another and whispered something that made him glance sharply toward the door. And through all of it, I stayed in my office. Not pacing, not watching the clock, just still. I adjusted a framed photo of my dog, sipped the last of my coffee, slowly opened my drawer and pulled out a small folder labeled Public Coordination Rutherford. Inside, a copy of the original funding memo for the tech initiative. Signed by me, stamped with the state seal. Just as I set it down, I heard it, the sharp click of dress shoes on tile, the low murmur of voices. The electric shift of the air when cameras roll and authority enters the room. It was almost noon, almost showtime. I stood up, smoothed my blazer, took one last glance in the mirror by the door. Invisible, yes, but not for long. The timing was exquisite. Sierra had just clicked to a slide that read "Future-proofing our relevance," branding in the post-authenticity era, a phrase so hollow it practically echoed, when the first flash went off outside the glass doors. A loud click whir cut through her monologue, followed by the unmistakable sound of professional lenses adjusting focus. Then came the murmur, low at first. The building itself had started whispering secrets. Chairs creaked, heads turned, and then doors opened. Not the soft whoosh of the usual executive suite doors. No, these swung wide like they were being cleared for a damn arrival, because they were. 2 men in navy suits entered first, straight backs, earpieces glinting, faces carved from granite. Capital detail. One nodded toward the conference table, another swept the back wall for obstructions. A second later, walked the governor of the entire state, in our building, in our boardroom, with cameras, lights, a full press crew in tow, microphones already positioned like snipers ready to capture every syllable. Everything stopped. Sierra froze mid-sentence, pointer still raised toward her half-baked diagram of brand alignment funnels. The CEO blinked so hard it looked like his contacts were trying to escape. Half the board stood up instinctively, as if royalty had just entered. To be fair, in our ecosystem, he was royalty. The governor didn't make surprise visits, not without protocol, briefing packets, press kits, and weeks of staged prep, except, of course, when someone invited him directly. Sierra's face cycled through 3 expressions in 5 seconds: confusion, delight, and then rapid, rising dread. I wasn't told about this," she said, voice pitching up into an anxious squeak. No one answered her. Governor strode in with practiced ease, camera flashes bouncing off the polished floors and his silver tie pin. Behind him, his communications director handed out folded press sheets. The Capitol photographers fanned out in perfect formation, already catching the wide shots. They knew where to stand, because they'd rehearsed this, because I had given them the floor plan. Sierra leaned toward her assistant, panic now visible behind her mascara. Did we authorize this? This even cleared with security. The assistant looked like she might faint. The governor didn't even glance at Sierra. He walked the length of the boardroom table, past the confused executives and frozen interns, until he reached the far side of the room, where I was already standing. I hadn't come through the front. I'd taken the side hallway, waited in the alcove until the timing was perfect, and walked in just 30 seconds before the governor. He smiled when he saw me. "Miss Rutherford," he said, loud enough for every mic in the room to catch. "There you are." There was a flicker of movement in the back. Someone from facilities nearly dropped their notepad. The governor extended his hand. "Thank you for your vision, for your persistence." This initiative wouldn't exist without you. He turned to the board, now collectively trying to decide whether to sit, stand, or vaporize on the spot. You all should be incredibly proud of what Miss Rutherford has accomplished here. Company's role in funding and conceptualizing the State Tech Redevelopment Fund is a model of private-public partnership. Cameras snapped. Shutters clicked. Somewhere, a PR manager's blood pressure reached critical mass. The governor stepped aside so his press director could begin the formal statement. I could feel the weight of the entire boardroom pressing against me, not with authority, but with recognition. Like a collective reckoning was washing over the room. Sierra had backed against the wall. She tried to recover, plastering a wobbly smile across her face, but her cheeks twitched. Her left hand trembled just enough to make the clipboard rattle. She mouthed something to her assistant, maybe fix this or what's happening, but no one was looking at her anymore, not a single soul. For once, all eyes were on me, and I hadn't said a word. The floor had shifted, the air had changed, and Sierra, crown princess of performative leadership, was now a glitch in the background. This wasn't her debut anymore, it was mine. The governor didn't hesitate. He walked with the weight of full authority, shoulders squared, voice calibrated for both intimacy and broadcast clarity. But when he reached me, he stopped short and dipped his head, not a politician's handshake or a performative photo op grin. A bow, small, precise, meant for me and only me. "Thank you, Miss Rutherford," he said, and his voice cut through the dead silent room like a gavel, "for making this $20 million program possible. We could never have done it without your vision." He looked deliberately toward the board, "and your personal trust." A ripple moved through the room. Executives leaned forward. One of the interns audibly gasped. Sierra, still frozen near the door like someone caught shoplifting on a jumbotron, had stopped blinking entirely. Governor turned toward the cameras, eyes sweeping across the room with deliberate weight. "This," he said, gesturing to me, "is a woman who doesn't just lead. She builds futures. Quietly, relentlessly, and without ever needing the spotlight. Flash, flash, flash. Every camera clicked at once. Her work," he continued, "has touched 6 counties, restored funding to 5 STEM programs, and helped craft legislation that will create over 8,000 jobs across the state. Most people don't know that, but the people who matter do." He looked directly at the CEO, who sat motionless at the far end of the table, face pale, knuckles whitening on the edge of the armrest. Then he smiled back at me. "You told me once, Laura, that real power doesn't need applause. But today, I'm giving it anyway." I didn't smile. I didn't curtsy. I simply nodded, hands folded calmly in front of me. The press director stepped forward and motioned for the statement to begin. The media team moved like a unit, tripods clicking into place, mics extended, a boom arm swinging just overhead. Sierra's assistant stepped back our frame, clearly realizing this wasn't just a surprise drop-in. This was a scheduled, coordinated event, one the board hadn't even known was coming, because it didn't come through them. It came through me. Glanced down the length of the conference table. The expressions were priceless. The COO looked like he was trying to remember every interaction he'd ever had with me. Had he shaken my hand last quarter? Had he ever answered my emails? The head of compliance was frantically scrolling her phone under the table. The CFO mouthed something to the CEO, but his words never made it out. And Sierra, sweet, coral-suited Sierra. She was still standing, but barely. Clipboard was clenched in one hand like a life raft, her mouth slightly open, breath shallow. She'd painted herself as the future of the company, and now the actual future had walked in with TV cameras and called me by name. I saw her swallow. Her lips moved. What is happening? What was happening was clarity. For once, there was no spin, no slick branding deck or soft focus graphics, no AI-generated jargon to hide behind, just facts, footage, names, programs, deals that mattered, and me. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. This wasn't vengeance. It was confirmation. For every board member who treated me like part of the wallpaper, for every exec who'd forwarded my memos without reading them, for every new hire who'd mistaken my quiet for irrelevance, this moment burned. Not like fire, like truth, and truth doesn't shout. It simply arrives, with cameras and silence. One sentence that lands harder than any promotion ever could. "Thank you, Miss Rutherford." The press exited like a well-trained storm, fast, efficient, and leaving behind a pressure change no one could ignore. Microphones were retracted, lights dimmed, suits vanished behind soundproof doors. The governor shook my hand once more and nodded to the board without waiting for acknowledgement. His message had been delivered. When the last camera left the room, Silence dropped like a curtain. Board chair Gerald Whitman, a man whose handshake was always a half-second too late and whose loyalty depended on wind direction, cleared his throat. His face was the color of dry chalk. "Laura," he said, voice brittle. "We didn't realize." I looked at him steady. "You never asked." The words didn't carry venom. They didn't need to, they were factual, like reading out loud from a balance sheet. Then I turned to Sierra. She flinched before I even moved, still clutching her clipboard like a holy relic, mascara starting to smudge at the corners. Her lips parted like she was going to say something, anything, but the words caught somewhere behind her perfect veneers. I reached into my bag and pulled out a crisp, heavyweight envelope, hand-addressed, sealed in red, the kind used by lawyers and people who have had enough. "This is for you," I said. She took it without opening it. I could see her eyes scanning the seal like it might explode. "I had your department moved under compliance," I said softly. "Effective immediately. That's where trust funds go when they're under audit." Her breath hitched. "Audit? What audit?" I raised an eyebrow. "You've been using restricted capital allocations to fund a personal brand refresh campaign. Paid influencers, merchandise, that neon sign in your creative zone, all misclassified." She blinked fast. I was told that was discretionary." "By whom?" She didn't answer. I stepped past her, heels echoing sharply against the tile. Each step was clean, measured, the sound of something ancient returning to its rightful center. At the board table, my chair was still empty. Until it wasn't, I pulled it out, sat, no flourish, no announcement, just a quiet reclaiming. And then, without ceremony, without prompt, someone slid a nameplate across the polished wood. It stopped just inches from my elbow. Laura Rutherford, Executive Chair, Strategic Affairs. It had been removed 6 months ago during operational restructuring. Now it was back. No one asked why. No one dared. I didn't look at Sierra again. I didn't need to. She was still standing, envelope in hand, unraveling in slow motion while the room shifted around her. She wasn't the center anymore. She never had been. This company had lived on quiet infrastructure for almost 2 decades. Invisible scaffolding, relationships, deals that didn't make headlines but moved millions. I was that scaffolding. The room remained still. No one applauded, no one cheered, because this wasn't a victory. It was an accounting, and the numbers had finally spoken. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.